Welcome to Christ in Private Practice, the podcast for Christian counselors building bold, sustainable practices with Christ at the center. I'm Camille McDaniel, licensed professional counselor, here to offer faith-based support, business insight, and creative strategies to help you thrive. Let's grow, be encouraged, and take action together. Welcome back to Christ in Private Practice. As always, I am glad that you are here. And as you see, we have a guest. So today we're going to be taking a closer look at an issue that has been a part of, I think, our community as it relates to ethics and professionalism. It's been a discussion that's been on the table. We may not always see it outright, but it's definitely in some groups and sometimes behind the scenes. And it surfaces for us, especially as Christian counselors. And it's going to be the topic for today, which is how do Christian counselors ethically serve both Christians and non-Christians? It's not a new topic, as I said, but we want to take a look at it because it definitely comes up with questions of how we can respond and how we can help and make sure that we are doing things ethically and also make sure that we're doing things that do not allow us as Christian counselors to come into conflict with the Lord that we serve. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that today and making sure that we answer any questions according to the faith. So to help us think through all of this, I am joined with my colleague, Tracy Fultz. And Tracy is a licensed clinical social worker. She's also the owner of Heartfelt Needs Counseling and Caring Center, Inc. She is an award-winning social worker, as well as a talented author and therapist. And she is deeply passionate about providing faith-based and ethical care. And she works mostly with women, but she also has stepped into the training field. And so I am delighted to have her here so that we can both talk about the intersection of ethics, identity, and faith-informed clinical work. So without further ado, thank you so much, Tracy, for talking with me for this episode.
Thank you, Camille, for having me. I'm so excited. I love this topic.
I do too. So we're going to just kind of jump right on in as we talk about this today, how Christian counselors can ethically serve Christians and non-Christians. And so let's look at this. First of all, why do you think that this topic even comes up for Christian counselors?
I think it comes up because there is such tension between church and state, so to speak. You know, in school, I worked with the Department of Children's Services for 22 years, and there was a lot of separation, church and state separation. And I think also we're taught to be silent about our faith. Right.
Yes.
And like we're not supposed to impose it on others. So that's apart from coming into the clinical space. So I think we bring all of that into the clinical space, and it leaves us with questions because my training initially to get my master's, it wasn't a topic of conversation. There was no training, even some of the things where I can see it. I'm CBT. That was what we did in school. I can see the Bible throughout it. And I went even to, the school that I went to was Southern Adventist. It was 7-day, but there was really not a conversation of how do you bring it in. And I think now people are seeking it out so much. And so therapists are trying to figure out, do I, don't I, is it ethical, is it not? So I think that it's a heated topic that needs to be addressed, and it's present now.
Yes, I'm glad that we're talking about it now because you're right. I did not have that training, and I had secular training, and I then had to, bring my knowledge of the word and start to study how it goes along with the training I received. But it was actually in my graduate school training mentioned that we don't bring ourselves into the room. We don't bring our faith. We don't bring our opinions. We don't bring our worldview. Yeah. So I think, you're touching on something there because I think then that caused a lot of confusion where it left a gap and people aren't really always sure what to do. Yeah. So then the next thing I wanted to bring up and ask you was
where do counselors, where do you think, based on just what you've seen over time, where do you think counselors are starting to feel most uncertain when they are working with clients who have a belief system that's different than theirs?
I think they're most uncertain about if I do bring it up, when and how. How do I approach
Mm-hmm.
that conversation? I think sometimes also where they're most uncertain or uncertainty comes from them is because they maybe don't feel like they don't know what it means for themselves. If I work with someone that's going against my beliefs, my values, what does that say about me? And I know we're confidential all there, but I think sometimes we have that inner narrative. What would others think if they know? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that
Yes.
begins to stem. It's that inner work. One of the things that I say is that we are first in the room, right? So I have to have self awareness, what's going on with me before I can show up for clients that have the same
Mhm.
beliefs as I do. So I think the uncertainty is because they're someone unsure maybe about their own beliefs. So how's that going to conflict? And then
Yes.
the when and how do I bring it up?
That makes sense. And you have a training that you offered, and I think it really lays out quite nicely how to take the steps to do it. Because again, for those who are wanting to and feeling called and
Mhm,
led, hey, I need to bring my whole self into the room, my
mhm,
faith included, and serve those who also have the same faith. Now what do I do? Like, what does informed consent look like? What do I
mhm,
do if, if it comes up in the room, how do I address it? So yeah, I think I've seen some of what you're talking about as
mhm.
well. I just don't know that there's a good framework. And I think that leads to the discomfort.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that even goes into, I was going to say, what are your thoughts on, like, why some counselors might feel uncomfortable integrating their faith or even having clear boundaries?
Mhm,
And maybe I don't know, maybe your answer might be a little bit of the same, but I noticed that sometimes it's about that foundation. But I also noticed that sometimes it is a little bit of fear of being bold in their faith. So
mhm.
I don't know. Why do you think some
Fear
of
of
the
being
counselors?
bold, like a bold about it
Yeah,
in
bold about it, and like just sharing this is the faith that I integrate into the services I provide,
Mhm,
for those who are coming with that worldview, and want it integrated. And even if you're not coming with a faith base, this is a faith, a worldview that influences my work. I
mhm,
wonder if sometimes they are nervous about backlash,
mhm.
and so therefore are not so upfront.
About
Yeah.
yeah. I think
Hmm.
a backlash, I think, sometimes they're not clear, about what the code of ethics say. You mentioned I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and people now it's to me, I feel like left up to interpretation. It's
Okay.
not clearly said. So when I read the code of
Hmm.
ethics, I see that it backs up what I do. So that
Yeah.
doesn't make initially I was a little afraid until I researched it myself and read it because you have the people that give you the fear base with code of ethics and that, oh, the board is going to do this and they're going to look. So I think sometimes people are bold in their faith. It's still afraid to be bold in their faith because of that, the way that it's presented, if you haven't taken the time to read it for yourself. But depending on the lens that you're reading it through, it can support you or not. Uh, I serve both. I serve Christians and non-Christians. And the way that I present it is you can see on my page, if you read my page, you're going to know I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
And I do it. We're talking about informed consent. And I think that's what's going to save you. Because one, you got to, I say, worry about who's before you, right?
Hmm.
And part of what the board will teach you, code of ethics will teach you, is if you are called before the board, can you justify your actions? Can you
Yeah.
explain why you did or didn't do something and how it served not yourself, but how it served your
Hmm.
client? And so
Yes.
then when you look at informed consent, my informed consent starts at consultation. I offer a free 15-minute phone consultation, and out the gate, I say, I'm a Christian. I don't try to convert. This is what that means. I believe that we're body, soul, and spirit. And when we're in that space, we're going to look at whatever your presenting concerns are. How's it impacting your body? How's it impacting your soul, your mind, your will, your emotions, your intellect, your imagination, and how's it affecting your spirit, if you believe that? And when I say spirit, we can really look at that to mean different things. Some people take their spirit and they're talking about meaning, purpose, connection to a higher or greater power. For me, that higher or greater power is Jesus. For you, it might be connecting, in the outdoors. So it can mean a lot of different things, but I give space for that as long as I feel like it's not harmful to me. So I'm giving them the information that they need. Informed consent means giving them enough information to make sure that they make the decision that they feel is best for themselves. So I'm giving them information about me, how that's going to show up in the space together at their pace.
Okay, that's spot on, because then you really are saying that it is important. And I was going to throw that one out there. It is important to be clear about your professional identity. It is important to be clear about how you deliver your counseling services. And like you said, that really saves you, because when you are clear and give an opportunity for informed consent, then even if somebody changes their mind and decides they don't really want the service you're providing, or they don't, want somebody who has that worldview, then you would let them know ahead of time. They don't feel like it's a sneak attack. They're not blindsided.
And I find that they appreciate it.
Absolutely.
They appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes. And even starting with, like you said, online. So like if you go to the person's website, you actually have an opportunity to read. Let's say by chance, though, they came through a insurance referral, if you accept insurance, and they didn't really even look at the website. They just contacted the referral their insurance provider gave them. And then they meet you. Still going through it and explain it helps to have a good foundation.
Because they know from, and I know everybody doesn't do a consult, but for me, it helps weed out and not waste my time. Right. Yeah. So they know from the gate. And even then I incorporated, we go in deeper when they get the intake packet, it's in there. This is what this means, it's faith-based, not trying to convert. It can show, there it is in written form. And then we revisit it again a little bit more in the intake process. And something else that I share this in my training that I do, I came up with what I call my 3R principles that I operate according to. And I tell my client, even though I'm the expert, meaning in this field for skills, I say I'm the professional. Even though I'm the professional, you're the expert of your experience. And so when it comes to counseling, and we talk about what counseling is, talk therapy, because I'm not medication management. I say, no, talk therapy. And I'm kind of a little bit solution focused too. I'm goal-oriented. I tell them the type of therapist I am, right? We're going to talk, because it's talk therapy. Are you ready to talk? You're just getting your personality in there. But I let them know what it means. But then I tell them I have 3 R's. The R's are you can receive what I say. Anything that I say in this space is open to you, and you're flowing and you're taking it in, and we're just going and you're hearing, and it's sitting well with you. You can resist what I say, right? And with the resistance is we're going to have some back and forth, and you might be like, whoa, now Tracy, I don't know about that. And so we got that good back and forth. And I'm like, I love it. I love it. Bring it on. Feel safe to do that. Then you can totally reject what I have to say. If it doesn't sit well with you, if the pace is too much, if it's not the direction you want to go in, you can totally reject it. I am good with that. That is okay. This space is about you, not me. That gives them even more,
I love those 3 R's. I believe I work like that myself in practice, but I love that you specifically broke them down, because I don't have a breakdown. But yes, I'm very collaborative, and that's exactly what you just described in detail, so that it gives the client, I believe, an opportunity to get even closer to their therapist, because you're essentially telling them you are free to be yourself. You are free to disagree with me. Yes, I have expertise in this area, but there's going to be some places where you have expertise, and you're going to help me to see your point of view. I love that you break it down like that and then share it with them. So, and all right, so while you're specifically giving us points so that anybody hearing this can also say, okay, wait, let me write this down, because how do we get started? Right? What would you tell them then would look like informed consent? What does ethical informed consent actually look like for a clinician who happens to be a Christian?
For a clinician that happens to be a Christian, all of what I just said, right? That's because you're giving them information. But if you're saying ethical informed consent as a Christian, then I say, I'm a Christian. And I say what that means because it can mean a lot of things, right? I
Yes.
say I'm a Christian who believes in Jesus and everything that the Bible teaches. That's what I mean by Christian, and how that shows up in this space to the degree that you're comfortable. And I break down what it can include. It can include prayer. It can include scripture. It can include worship, whatever feels comfortable. But for me, I don't bring it into this space unless you're comfortable with it, and we're going to check with it. And I do go ahead and share. I said I have clients that we pray at the end of every session. If you're not comfortable with that, let me make a note now, and I'll never bring it up again unless you do. So I tell them how it can be incorporated. If you want to incorporate your faith, I'm going to ask you about I told you a little bit about what mine is. Tell me about what yours is. If you say you're a Christian, what does that mean? If you say I'm not, I'm spiritual, tell me what that, because being spiritual and being religious, we talk about this in my training, two different things. And I give space for that because for me, I feel like I'm more spiritual than religious, even though I'm a part of a faith and a community. But when I get into my personal practices, my faith is my relationship, not rigid do's and don'ts.
Yes. Yeah. And we, you were mentioning that just a little bit before we went on air with the podcast about its relationship. It's not so legalistic. And because of the relationship, that can help us to desire more and more to do the things that are told of us. But again, like you said, everybody doesn't subscribe to that. And so getting real clear allows the client to know, hey, we are exactly aligned, or we have a different view of this, and what do I want in my counseling experience?
Right. And I think that's important, this part with the therapists that are wanting to integrate it, to be okay with that form of disclosure, because that's a part of the informed consent, right? So a lot of people are like, you're not supposed to share your faith or tell your faith because that's going to persuade them. Well, no, I'm informing them so they can choose if they want to move forward.
Absolutely. So then that means for some who are listening, they are absolutely comfortable with that. And for some who are listening, this gives them an opportunity to start to get clear on where they stand and how they would then communicate where they stand to their clients. And as you said, when you were talking about what you do with your clients, being able to share who they are, but also allow the client to know this does not mean this is something you have to accept for yourself or your counseling experience. I am just sharing openly so that you can make an informed decision of if you feel I am the right fit for you.
And you have to decide if they're the right fit for you as the therapist.
That's true. Yes. And that's also ethical. Because if you know that there's going to be a conflict because what you provide is not going to be in the best interest of the potential client, because that's not what they want, but that's where you are trained and that's where you rock and roll, that's your lane, then they now get to make a decision and be able to stay or move on if they need to.
Because it's about informed is about them and you.
Yes. Yes. And that's us getting comfortable with that's all right. And that is all right. And you do consultations. And I wanted to also just quickly just make a note in the podcast to say, if you're not able to do a consultation, then make sure that you are clear on your website, on any directories that you're on. Please make sure in your paperwork, or when they get there, like we're talking now, have an understanding of how you want to be able to share with them, inform them, how you operate, who you are, give them the opportunity to have that included or not. And that way they can definitely, you have multiple steps so that if something came up and the board wanted to know what steps you took, then you are right and in order with everything that you have chosen to do. Okay.
And I would say to those who don't do the consultation, kind of hold the intake, your initial session, as a like that, in discernment counseling, you get them to commit to one, right?
Yeah.
So if you just say my intake is just the one, and at the end you're going to check in, hey, how's
Mhm.
this feel? Do you think you want to move forward with more? So it does, if you get into that intake and you feel like, oh, they're not a fit, or they don't choose you, we don't get offended. We're going to refer you, to who's best for you if we can.
We're
But
not
it
going
doesn't
to
have to move forward if you get in there and you don't have a feel.
That's very freeing for a lot of people. You don't have to move forward if it's not going to be a good fit. Because, and this is where I have seen some questions. Matter of fact, there was just, I think, some conversation online that I saw in the last maybe week or two where people were talking about what if it's not a right fit? What if the client is not a right fit? And, or if I don't get a good feeling about it. And what you're talking about, what we're talking about together is about making things step by step. So you have an order, you have a procedure that can be replicated. This is not just saying, I don't get a good vibe. This is saying, I have gone through steps to inform, steps to allow you to express yourself. We have now assessed what I have shared, what you have shared, and determined what I'm offering is not going to be in your best interest, or the client determines what is being offered is not going to be in their best interest. And I think that that's very clear. That way, if somebody brought it up to the board for, I don't know, abandonment, even though it might just be the first session, it's like, well, these are the steps I took to ensure that the client was getting the best care and that we were a good fit for treatment,
Right.
that I had
And
what
don't
they
be
need.
afraid to educate. Out the gate, first session, educate on client therapist fit and why it's important. Because I cannot tell you how many clients I have had that I thank God that they came to somebody else because their experiences were horrible, and that could have been cut off at the front end. You were talking
Yes.
about client therapist fit, because everybody's not going to be a fit. I even tell my people, when I do the phone calls, go on my page, because I'm virtual. My practice is completely virtual. Listen to my voice, look at my face, feel me. Because it's sometimes that simple. I can't stand their voice, right? You might not
Right.
like the voice.
Right.
I'm a hands person. You might can't get with that,
Yeah.
right? That might make you more anxious. And so we educate on client therapist fit at the beginning. So at the end, you can say, go back. Remember, we talked about client therapist fit. So let's talk about that before we decide next steps. How do you feel?
That's wonderful. Getting comfortable, like you said, with that education. I have done that as well when people are and usually that has come up for me in my practice when somebody has seen my it turns out has already seen my bio, but then with it, they may have their own life experiences around what is on my page. And then they're like, this is who I am. This is what I need help with. This is how I live or whatever. Is that going to be okay for you? And usually that is like, is there an acceptance there, on my end? And I usually will then, like you said, well, have you gone to my page? Have you read about how I practice, who I am? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, do you feel okay about me? And again, like you're sharing and being okay with that, that's all right. That is all right. And that's just good care, allowing people to have choice. We don't want to try to convince somebody we're the right person. We just want to be able to reach the people we are supposed to reach. Yeah.
And it's so, if they are someone who works with both, sometimes I have had non-believers or people or Christians living a lifestyle that they know they not come specifically to me because of what they say. We're talking about being bold and then letting it be out there.
Yes.
There are people that are seeking us because we are bold and put it out there. So I had one specific couple. They were, and I'm probably going to get the language messed up here, but he was married to a woman, but he had same-sex attraction, and she was poly. I think that's what it was, but she had multiples, even though they had theirs. And when they came in I talked about it in consultation, talked about it in the intake, and he, even though she wasn't a believer, she identified as an atheist, he identified as a Christian. And when I explained, okay, in marriage, I even share, I believe that a marriage is between one man and a woman. I can help in certain areas, but how do you feel that I have that belief? And he was like, I knew it from reading your page. This is what I want. I want to get back to my faith. I love my wife. I accept her, but I want us to be grounded in what I believe is true. They were good for it. I was good with it. And we worked.
Perfect. And that, I love that you shared that. First of all, it was going to touch on something I was going to ask you about, how we might be respectfully and ethically and professionally, how might we set certain boundaries if we have clients coming to us that have life patterns or experiences or things that they believe in that do not look like what we hold as truth and what we believe in. Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect example. I actually had, and I wonder how many people do have this and how they also handle it ethically and professionally, but I had a similar situation where somebody's life and how they were living, they had faith in Christ. Their life and how they were living was different than what biblical truth would state, but they saw my profile and they wanted to work with me, but I wanted to make sure that there was no offense. And so I wanted to be clear on how I practice and how my worldview influences that, see how they felt, and ask what part or how much, I don't think I asked what part, how much of your faith do you want to bring into this? Because I want to be mindful of that as we move forward together. And they were like, I want to bring it all in. And so then I said, okay, so what you just shared, can I gently push here? Because according to your faith, there's going to be some conflict. And mm-hmm. let's talk about how you feel about that. I think people can be very, very understanding and appreciate when you are clear. When you're clear, when you don't just surprise people, when it's like, oh, well, I didn't know that's what we're doing and that's where we're going in the session. You know,
clarity creates safety.
Absolutely. Perfectly said. Perfectly said. So then and just so everybody knows, because I wanted it to be really kind of clear, because I feel like this is such an important topic. As you all are listening to this podcast, you will go back, you will be able to also see that we have covered why it is very important for counselors to be clear about their professional identity from the beginning. We're talking about what it looks like to ethically inform our clients. When you happen to be a counselor who is a Christian and also provides Christian counseling services, but may see all people. Like Tracy said, I also in my practice see all people. They do not all come with a faith of Christianity. And even if they do, it doesn't always look the same. So, so being clear on that. So then let's jump into this one. How can a counselor, and I know we've talked about it, but let's see if we can't kind of specifically give some steps for everyone who's listening. How can a counselor respect a client's beliefs without setting aside their own values? What does it really look like in the session? And I feel like you kind of almost answered this a little bit, but I want to specifically put it out there.
And I think the work initially, Camille, is done within you. Right? If we're talking about respecting someone that has different values, practices, beliefs, serve a different God or whatever, the work is first going to start with you, because we're the first person in the room. And I have to be aware of my values, my biases, right? My blind spots. I got to work to get a better understanding of what they may be. My my things that I'm hardcore strong about that could move me if it's brought in, to session. So I think the first step is do your own work, whether it's training, supervision, listening, because you have great podcasts. I love your podcasts. I listen to them, listening to podcasts, getting into the discussion. You got to do your own work. And so part of what I do in the training that I offer is, because I love journaling, I love reflection prompts and all those we do those I have a lot of that I share, you asking yourself these questions. So first step is do your work. You got to do your work. You're going to say something?
I like that one. I like that answer. And every time you're like, we talk about that in the training. Now, look, for everyone who's listening to the podcast, I am not somebody who, first of all, you all know, usually you all are seeing me, and then you have sprinkles of people who join me on the podcast for different topics along the way, because I want to just be very mindful in this season of who is on the podcast speaking to you all. But Tracy really does have a good training. Like, it's not, so Tracy doesn't know I was going to say this, but Tracy does have a good training. So if anyone who is listening, whether you happen to be a student in grad school, whether you happen to be a seasoned professional or just starting out, and you're not sure because your training in grad school did not prepare you for this, and you really haven't been prepared in any other area, take the training so that you don't have to go along guessing, so that you don't have to feel unsure or even feel a bit nervous in the event that somebody claimed that you're not being ethical because you have brought your faith into the room in a way that doesn't sit well with them. Go ahead and take our training so you can actually have some step-by-step ways of doing it, have some role plays or have some worksheets, like, just have some resources. So that way, again, you don't have to guess. And this is something that can be replicated with every person that you serve. Yeah. So anyway, back to our regularly scheduled conversation. So, let's talk about this one. Where do you see that counselors unintentionally can cross an ethical line when it comes to faith?
When they bypass it. Because if you're unaware of what they're holding as their belief, what their spiritual experiences has been, you don't have the knowledge to kind of know what direction to go in. So you could say something, do something, take them somewhere. And remember, we talked about this, ethical is to do no harm. You can take them in a space or bring up something that is harmful because there's ignorance, because you didn't ask. And I think that's probably the uninformed, because if you're concerned about when and how should I do it, that means you care, right?
Yes.
So if we care, we're going to do the work to not harm, but sometimes our ignorance causes us to harm.
Okay, all right, so then let's say our ignorance has caused us to harm, and now we gotten ourselves in a little bit of hot water and we're in the session. So then what might be some like appropriate boundaries in those moments to respond to the client? Like, how can we kind of shift the focus and get back on track? Because I think sometimes I feel like just owning it, just stepping in and just own. I mean, what do you?
Key. We have to be humble, right? We have to operate from a place to say, I'm a professional, but I'm human, right? I'm in this space as your support, as your aid, as an educator, but I don't know it all. And you know what? Let me take it back, because that's something that I didn't ask you about, and I'm sorry. Is it good can we talk about it now, or do we need to talk about it later?
Yes, that is right. I absolutely agree. Being humble. Again, even for ourselves, you think about how you actually respond to somebody when maybe they misspeak or act in a way that kind of takes you off guard, and then they own it, and then they say, "Oh, well, I'm sorry," and then they take a step back. All of the agitations sometimes can kind of mellow a little.
Especially when you're genuine, right? I'm not going to say all of that because you're a dollar sign before me, right? I'm going to say that because I'm genuinely concerned and I'm sorry, and that was not my intent. I'm here as a caring, like they can sense that, right?
Yes.
So if I'm going to not just say it, but hopefully it's going to come across in my nonverbals and the energy that I give off to them. And so that brings it down. And I found being humble in space, that's something else that it builds trust, right? If I can be able to be not only culturally competent, but culturally humble, like we're practicing cultural humility, it builds trust. And
absolutely.
So if I misstep, I had one trainer is like, when they talk about when you're doing trauma work, if you open them up, you got to close them back down. You got to close them, before you. So if I misstep and I hurt, I got to start the process to heal. And I do right then at the point, because sometimes we don't know until after, right? I've had several sessions, and not even just for faith, where I missed the client's pace. I missed a moment and I rushed them through something. And it sits with me. And so when we come, sometimes it's an email of, hey, I didn't give space for this and I apologize. Do we need to get you in sooner? But when we do come back, can we start here? Because I owe you an apology, or I owe you a moment where we need to sit in awareness. I need to acknowledge, like, I own it.
Yes. And I think people are not used to that too, to
Mhm.
even apologize, to even say, you know what, I'm so sorry because
Mhm.
I did X, Y, and Z, and I noticed that that didn't work well, or we weren't ready for that. So I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing or anything like that. I think people are oftentimes used to more of the expert, like, that just keeps on going no matter what, no
Right.
matter what, and not
Yeah.
stopping. So yeah, I think that is definitely a good way to, like you said, not just treat people like they're a dollar sign, but to really be genuine in what you are bringing
Mhm.
to the table as you're talking to them. I feel like we're going through, I was going to bring up a few things and I'm like, we are already covering these topics. We are rocking it
Can
because
I
I was
say
going
something
to,
about that though
oh,
before we go to something else? When we're talking
oh
about
yes,
culture,
please.
that's healing. Like, I'm all about, we got to do the work too. So when I'm able, it took me doing the work to say, I'm not there to fix them, right? I'm not there to put on a show. I'm not there to be perfect. Like, I had to do the work, because I would come away feeling like, did I do it right? Did I help them? Oh, they're not. Like, I took ownership of their healing.
They're healing.
Yes. And
Yes.
so when I did the work and I began to look at, what does it mean to be, to practice humility? Well, that means that I got to know that I ain't the be all end all, and I ain't got it. I can't. And so that's not only benefiting them when we can go back and say, you know what? I missed it. It's benefiting us. It takes some of that pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. That okay, and that reminds me of something that happened actually where you talk about taking off that pressure, just having that humility. I had a client who we had a misunderstanding of the term God. And so that's where in hindsight I could have asked more about what that meant for her and what that looked like and did not. So when I finally realized, I said, wait a minute, let me take a step back. I said, I think I have made a mistake. What are we referring to here? I think we're talking about two different things, but we're using the same term. The client kind of giggled and they explained, and I said, okay, now let me ask you another question. Can you inform me a little bit more about
Mm-hmm.
that belief so I understand
Yeah.
how it integrate into your life and kind of influence some of the things you're going on, because that's not one that I'm familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was able to kind of reinforce, because my worldview is through this lens and it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like yours is through that one. So help me. And it went well. I mean, they really did. They understood. Thankfully, that it did not cause any harm, any offense, and we got back on track. But being able to just acknowledge, like you said, that is something that you have to do the work on to be
Mm-hmm.
able to even say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oop, I'm okay. I messed up. I don't know all. I don't know it all, and I do need you to help me to then better help you." Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important too. I feel like we need to have that in a training somewhere. So it's like that's kind of a whole nother thing that is hard sometimes. And I know we have to, in our graduate training, which has been a long time since we've been in grad school, but in graduate training, you have to do a lot of introspective
Mm-hmm.
work. But I don't know that we always get to everything. We don't really always have time, and that's
Mm-hmm.
very important.
Yeah.
So we'll look well. I'm gonna ask us to talk about one more thing, and before we kind of get to our last part. But what would you say to a Christian counselor who wants to serve all people? They also want to maintain their faith, they want to practice ethically, but they're still not sure.
Still not sure is a sign that you care, and that's okay.
Mhm.
We already hit doing the work you want to. I think part of it is knowing that our values are still present, but silently, and they're not the center, right? Because
Mhm.
everything, we're client centered, client led. And so, and if you're not sure, we talk about training, we talk about supervision, but what I would ask the question, what is your uncertainty? Is it fear, right? Is it lack of understanding? Because you need to look at your code of ethics a little bit more. Sometimes it's, and if I'm being true, where I struggled a little bit, especially with me coming into the space new with education, some of the groups, it's so many voices telling you this and that. So is your uncertainty somebody else's voice, right?
That's yes.
So,
Yes.
and then definitely, like how we talk about niche and different things, find out, like if you want to integrate, you want to hold space, what does it look like for you? Where does it feel right? And to what degree? Some people say, I do integrate it, but I don't pray. I don't bring up scripture. That's fine. What is it going to look like for you? Is it just going to be that you acknowledge? Because I think that language, and I think you did this, it was one of the sections in your summit where we talked about you have therapists that are Christians
Yes.
versus
Yes.
Christian counseling, right? So
Yes.
you got to identify where do you fall, and both are okay. Both are okay.
Yes. That's going to be I think a very important point for people who, and I've seen some people are saying, I'm feeling called to go ahead and operate more in my faith, in my business and what I offer. So they need to get clear, got to get a blueprint. What am I doing? So that my steps are not just all over the place, but yes, let's get clear on what we're doing. Tracy, you know, our time is coming to an end, and you know, I enjoyed talking to you. So, but tell our listeners two things. If there was anything you want them to just kind of take away, which I think they need to take away the whole episode, but if there's anything that you want them to remember, one thing to remember, and then where can we find your trainings, your website, any things that you are doing? Because this is going to be something that is on the website for people, on the Spotify, on the YouTube, so they can really get more equipped, better armor.
Yeah. So first, I think if there's anything that I would say is just get an understanding, if you want to do it, of ethical. We talked about that. Ethical to do no harm. And if you know your work is that, just line it up, play it out, sit with it. I think finding the definitions, the textbook definition, your lived experience definition, your living, breathing definition that grows and ebbs and flows and develops, and get the definition of ethical in you, and that's your foundation, right? That's where you're going to kind of start. So that's the one thing that I say, if I take anything away, what that really means. My page, and I'm doing a lot of development. So my page of heartfeltneeds.com, that's where you're going to get a lot of my clinical stuff. I just this week got my LinkedIn up and going, and that's where I'm going to be doing a lot of this work, the education, the ethical integration. I forgot to tell you, even this week I'm doing the workflow. I'm going to do integrated care letter. That's going to be a monthly newsletter, and I'm going to have some information on there with that. And actually, if it's okay, Camille, the first download that I give in the welcome email, I'll give it to you if you want to put it on the podcast.
Yes.
Some
Absolutely.
questions. It's just some questions under different headers that you can ask yourself. So Heartfelt Needs is my clinical LinkedIn. You can get a lot of the continuing education, this type of information. And also I'm going to be, like I said, starting the newsletter next month. It's integrated care letter. That's what it is, ICL. And so I'll get that, but hopefully it's going to be a pop-up at some point on my Heartfelt Needs. But even there's on my Heartfelt Needs, you can get my information checkbox. But LinkedIn for this specific type of information may be a smart, and I'll get that link to you as well.
Oh, that's going to be good. And Tracy is a part of the Christ in Private Practice community. Now, if you are listening to these podcasts and you are not receiving our newsletters, then you are also missing out on some information that we provide. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put in the newsletter Tracy's information and her training. Also, you're missing out on the ethical edge that we go and put in every single week, so you can kind of make sure you're staying sharp on what's going on in our field and in our ethical codes. And then we have some other things that are about community and about words of wisdom for your week. So make sure that you kind of go ahead and sign yourself up for that newsletter. And I will place Tracy's information in the newsletter as well as on the website and underneath these podcasts, because she really has some good information. And we all want to make sure we are doing things right and in order. That's biblical. We want to be right and in order, and that is ethical. We do not want to have any challenges brought up against our professionalism or our license. So if this message and this podcast episode has been helpful for you, please do share it. Do share it everywhere. Like it, comment if you want to. I do read them and I try to get back. But other than that, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you, Camille.
And until we meet again, God bless.